Welcome, everyone. Thank you for all attending. We've got a large attendance today. I'd like to welcome you to our series on green specs for the AIA Monterey Bay Committee on the Environment. Last month we covered Construction Waste Management Division 1, and we hope to have that up on our website for your viewing on our YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a COAT member. In addition to education such as this webinar, we're committed to advocacy work in our local communities as it relates to sustainability, health, and equity in the built environment. Today we've collaborated with our neighbors to the north, the AIA San Francisco COAT, and we have Charlie Stott here on the panel, and he is the co-chair of the COAT in San Francisco. And if you're interested in their programming, they meet every third Tuesday at 12:30, and that information is on the AIASF website. Charlie will also be fielding questions at the end of our talk, so please feel free. You can write your questions in the Q&A box or raise your hand and ask live. Today, I would like to introduce to you, we're going to speak on green specs, and we have a really exciting speaker today with a wealth of knowledge, and that's Ann Hicks Harney. Ann has over 30 years of experience with an emphasis on providing high quality design imbued with a solid technical foundation and a sustainable emphasis. Formed in 2016, Long Green Specs provide sustainability focused construction specifications and building science expertise to architectural firms across the country. Ms. Harney has an expertise in health and environmental impacts of building materials and has lectured extensively on this topic. Her work is currently focused on improving material selections on architectural projects through the architectural specification process, and she is working with nationally recognized architectural firms across the US. She also provides material assessment services, incorporating her knowledge base of materials in service to improving building design. She is active in many local and national committees. She's a member of the AIA COAT Advisory Group. She was the chair of the AIA Materials Knowledge Working Group in 2016 and 17, a national committee identifying the AIA's role in the growing issues of material transparency. She served 4 years as a member of the USGBC Materials and Resources Technical Advisory Group, recommending technical solutions to the LEED rating system, including credit changes and adjustments and prerequisite improvement. And she was a founding co-chair of the Building Enclosure Council Baltimore, a forum for sharing ideas on building science, building design, and science issues. In 2016, Ms. Harney was elected to the American Institute of Architects College of Fellows and was named a LEED Fellow. So with that great bio, I'd like to turn our presentation over to Ann. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Libby. All right, let's see if I can figure out how to advance the slides. There they go, that worked. All right, we have learning objectives. There they are. We're very excited about them. We're going to talk today about green specs, and I want to stress that I have green specs better materials, because really truly what we're talking about is not just writing a kind of boring 1,000-page book that details all the specification information. We're talking about how we're going to make sure that our buildings are built of better materials. So let's all focus on the fact that we're talking about what we build with and the palette that we use to create our amazing, wonderful designs. So that's what we're talking about. But we are also talking about specs. So my tagline here is, if you don't spec it, you won't get it. You're going to get this PowerPoint as a PDF, so please don't stress about screen shooting and stuff, but I'll tell you that ahead of time. There's all kinds of information buried in here, and I don't want you to have to write fast. A spec is basically a 3-part document. Part 1 is general, part 2 is products, and part 3 is execution. So the thing that you have to focus about if you're going to try to green up your specs in part 1 is going to be the submittals. What you are asking the contractor to provide to you to prove that they are doing what you want them to do. In part 2, you're going to be focused on mainly 2 things: the performance requirements, what global requirements you're going to ask them to meet, and then also critically the list of products that you are doing. There. Answer your poll question better than I did. So that's the kind of not concept about how specs work. So in part 1, for submittals, what you want to focus on is data about recycled content. You want to focus about data about VOC admitting for adhesives, for paints, for other interior components. You want to focus on getting submissions about FSC. You want to focus about VOC emissions for composite wood, for flooring. And then you also want to talk about getting product declarations, transparency declarations, which are either the environmental impact stuff or the health impact stuff. We'll talk more about that in more depth later. For performance requirements, you got to lay down what you're submitting on. Okay, for interior products, we want to show that you meet CDPH standard method V1.1 2010 or V1.2, depending on if the V1.1 still allows you to work and there's more of them there. Anyways, but this is all the stuff that you're laying down that you want them to see. There's a lot of performance requirements. And then critically under 2.2 product info, this is the list where this is where you want your preferred products. You want to make sure that you choose as many good products as you can. If you know there are certain products that are better, you should list them. If you have 3 of them, no one can complain. So that is always my advice, is choose your better products. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about specifications and materials, and I'm going to use the A&D Materials Pledge. The A&D Materials Pledge sourced out of the Materials Knowledge Working Group in the AIA. Then it was taken up. A lot of the effort was done by the Portland AIA. They had a materials crew there. It was then launched in Portland, and then it came back through the AIA Materials Knowledge Working Group, and it was presented to the AIA board, and they adopted it. It's not the AIA Materials Pledge, it's the A&D Materials Pledge. All of this is confusing. The point is there are 5 filters that are used in the pledge to talk about how we can choose better materials. Those filters are human health, climate health, ecosystem health, social health and equity, and circular economy. That's the last time I'm going to read you a slide. So that's the way we're going to talk about this today. Human health is our first topic. When we're talking about human health, and these, I'm going to start each one. These are the slides that were used to present to the AIA board, the A&D Materials Pledge Human Health. It's all about seeking to eliminate the use of substances that are hazardous. That's your human health piece, all right? So what do? We're talking about substances in our buildings. And okay, we really aren't that worried about this sheetrock wall. I mean, it's sheetrock, it's sitting there, but everything off gases, everything floats around. You touch things, that's the dermal abrasion, that's the last one. You inhale things, you're inhaling in the air. We're all worried about the VOCs and the emissions, and you're also ingesting things. And I just want to stress with ingestion that it's not just a little baby sitting on the floor. We all rub our eyes, touch our nose, all that stuff. We've all learned not to touch our face in these COVID-19 times, but the point is we still do, and we all are ingesting things. So that's the 3 ways this stuff gets into our bodies. There's a lot of stuff out there. We're surrounded by it. The phthalates, the perfluorinated chemicals, all this nonsense. I love this graphic because it's so clear, it's so colorful, but also it has these great infographics with the little sperms linked to the decrease in sperm count, the phthalates. So, but this is really confusing. What the heck is a phthalate anyways? So short version, phthalates make plastic flexible. BPA makes plastic rigid. So if you're holding a piece of plastic in your hand and it's flexible, that means it's got phthalates. If it's rigid, it means it's got BPA, but they're all in the plastics, right? So I put together this chart, which is all the ingredients on the left, which are the red list ingredients. In the middle is where they're used, because it's so really hard to figure out where BPA is used or where chromium B is used. It's really hard. And then the right-hand side is what the health impact is. Is it a carcinogen? Is it an endocrine disruptor? So then I put, for this talk, I pulled this this off. These are some critical things that you can think about. And you also have to sort of, we can't think of everything. So you might want to just choose one or two and focus on those just as a starter. But this is sort of the plastic stuff. And a lot of them you can see on the right are endocrine disruptors. And I always like talking about these because I think a lot of the boys think that that's a girl problem. They don't have to worry about it. This great article by Nick Kristof, who's a New York Times columnist, sort of tells us that isn't the case. Sperm counts have been dropping. Some of the information I've read is sperm counts are dropping 1% a year. So do simple math, in 100 years, this count will be 0. So that's when the world's going to end. So, or start to end. But this is the problem. It affects girls, it affects boys. And there was this great book written by Shanna Swan with the tagline, How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. We all know someone that's had fertility issues, and we should all be more focused on the stuff we're putting in our buildings because that is one of the causes of this. It's an issue. If you don't, so what can you do? You can improve your palette. Again, this is about material choice. Choose better materials. Flooring. The top left is Shaw's bio-based pet flooring, which I think they never actually released, but I hope it's coming out soon. Quarry tile is a great thing for a kitchen. You don't have to use a resinous floor. You can use quarry tile like in the olden days. And on the right, that's a great picture of a project I used to work on with my former firm. That looks like polished concrete. It's not. It's Ashford formula. It's a densifier. That's 50 cents a foot on concrete. And look at how beautiful that floor is. And you got a concrete floor in all the buildings you're doing. You don't need to cover them with something else. You can talk to your client about showing the concrete off. Counters. It's always better to use a natural counter if you can use granite, if you can use a stone, if you can use wood. But truly, even something like a quartz agglomerate is better than a solid surface. Quartz agglomerate adds a natural material into the mix, so it makes less plastic, more natural material. There's always a lot of stuff you can do with counters to improve. And coatings. There's some great manufacturers out there. Short version is everything should be Benjamin Moore. If you don't spec it, you won't get it. Here's my list of the flooring. We talked about quite a bit of this. There's some great tile manufacturers. There's great wood manufacturers. There's great resinous flooring. There's a manufacturer called Duracryl. They're making liquid linoleum. You can use it in a commercial kitchen. What more could you want? These are products for solid surface and for laminate. There's a lot of great places out there. These are all great examples of, you don't have to, you're not tied down. You have multiple people you can use. And finally, coatings. There's a bunch of coatings to use. They're all good. Climate impacts. All right, so for climate impacts, what we're talking about is carbon emissions. We're talking about embodied carbon. All right, what is embodied carbon? All right, this is sort of the life cycle of a product or a whole system of construction. The embodied carbon is the extraction and the manufacturing. So this is the LCA boundary for if you run an LCA on a project. The whole system boundary is product, construction, use, and end of life. But the product stage A1 through A3, remember that phrase, it's going to come up later, is where you're talking about embodied carbon. So the material extraction, the transport from the extraction point to the manufacturing point, and then the manufacturing. The transport under A4 to the construction site, it's not part of embodied carbon. Embodied carbon is just the act of making the product, all right? And what we're seeing is embodied carbon is a huge piece of the global warming, the global issue of carbon in the atmosphere. It's almost as big as transportation, which I think is a reason when you see people talk about embodied carbon, they kind of talk about how many cars off the road, because you kind of equate it. It's almost 23%, and it's predominantly concrete, steel, and aluminum. All right, those are your big ticket items. And I saw a presentation today in the middle of the day. A couple of interesting things. They said the second most used product in the world is concrete, and the first is water. So that's like, I love that little statistic. But anyways, concrete, steel, and a concrete structure and insulation are big ticket items for embodied carbon. But we've been doing really great on carbon in general because we're making much more efficient buildings. Good for us. Pat yourself on the back, everybody. And that's great. But the problem is, as your building becomes more efficient, the piece of the pie that is embodied carbon gets to be a bigger percentage of the problem. And that's why we're now focusing on embodied carbon. This is sort of the carbon rundown of a typical typical high performance commercial building. And that, for the 100-year life cycle of your building, but we all know most of our buildings aren't 100-year life cycles. And also we can't wait until we can't wait until 2115 to solve this problem. This is a problem we've got to rush to solve. Here's a more typical situation of how long your building will last. More importantly, here's a more typical situation of what our issue is. We've got to solve this one in 35 years. And the materials and construction emissions piece is a huge percentage of this piece of the puzzle. So here's the 10 steps to reducing embodied carbon. These are by Larry Strain from Siegel and Strain out by you in Oakland. These are really great. He wrote a great article about this for AIA a couple of years back. A lot of these we all know: reuse buildings, low carbon concrete mixtures, et cetera, minimize waste, all this stuff. There was a great presentation done, and I think Charlie's going to throw that link in the chat. Carbon Drawdown Now. This was done by 3 people. One of them was Chris Magwood, who I was listening to at noon today. He's great. He's from the Endeavour Center up in Ontario. It was a really wonderful presentation they did, and that keynote is about 1 hour and 5 minutes. It's great if you have a commute. It's a great thing to listen to, and it's really entertaining. They do a great job. If you can watch the slides too, that's great, but don't watch slides while you drive. I love this set of slides. This was their insulation, and you can see they have all the insulation on the left there. They have the carbon information on the right. And then they're saying, wait, what is this, a negative number? Hempcrete is negative. Hempcrete is a material that stores more atmospheric carbon than was emitted in harvesting and manufacturing. And Chris was talking today about, in this presentation he did, about all the stuff he's doing with hempcrete, and he's coming up with buildings that have like a 3-digit embodied carbon number, which is unheard of. So you can do great stuff with this. This is basically photosynthesis, where plants are grabbing the carbon and burying it into the earth, and they're storing it, and they store it for the lifespan of the product. There are tons of these products out. You can see some of them listed there. There's a ton of straw, hemp, there's cellulose. There are a bunch of natural products. We're all used to knowing that wood is better than steel and concrete because it's natural and it stores carbon, but there's a ton of other bio-based materials, natural materials that we can use to build with. How do you figure all this out, which is really complicated? So you basically, it depends on what stage of your project you're in. If you're in schematic design, you want to do LCAs, you want to run your Tally or your Athena, you want to figure out globally what generally you should be putting in. Should I use wood structure? Should I use how much concrete, what PSI, all that kind of stuff. When you get to construction documents, EC3 is going to be your friend. So EC3 is embodied carbon in construction calculator, and it is located at I think which went into the chat where it's located. It's basically a storage place for environmental product declarations. So an EPD is basically tracking a whole bunch of environmental impacts. The primary one we're focused on right now, the carbon, is the global warming potential. But they also track acidification, which is making water too acid, ozone depletion, which is how it's crashing the ozone layer, eutrophication, which is making water too base, the other direction of pH, and then smog and ozone creation, which is generating smog. So it focuses on all those 3 things. So EC3 looks like this, and it has all these different elements. Now, this is an amazing system. I'm a pilot user. You can see it by my name because I'm working on a big job that we're trying to help them develop the program. They are developing all this stuff. You can see next to some of the names on the left-hand side, there's all these things that are piloting. But right now, there are still 10 critical pieces that are in there. Concrete's in there, steel, wood. You log in, you sign up, and you can see all of this stuff. You can set up projects. You can see other projects. You can find EPDs and compare EPDs based on all the different pieces that you put in. So this is the page. If we went to gypsum board, you can see you can filter by the rating, the thickness. But the critical thing is you can filter by the region down there on the bottom, USA. And then once you filter by the region, you get this box plot that comes up on the right-hand side. So that gives you the variance between kind of the range of all the different levels of EPDs of the GWP on the each EPD. And on the top, across the top, you see a purple line right between 3 and 3.5, and that's the CLF baseline. So that is giving them, we'll get to that in a second, that's giving you a general baseline for what you can set as a goal when you're writing your specs. So this, I went to carpet, and this is just a pull up, and this is what you get. You get, this category is carpet, the manufacturer's interface, and there's all the different product names, and then the product, and on the right-hand side is the kg CO2, all right? So this is great. It's a wonderful place to look for EPDs and to compare them. You can compare them side by side. You can get all the information you need at this one location. I'd highly recommend everybody sign up for it. The Carbon Leadership Forum is another place, and I think that link's going to pop into the chat shortly. That is the place you find the baselines. The baselines look like this. These are the 2021 baselines, and I believe Charlie put the link I gave him was for the baseline sheet. You get to a page and you can download these baselines. You scroll down, it's about page 15 maybe towards the end, and you get this whole list of baselines. They're going to tell you what they've set as the baseline for all these different categories. So the Carbon Leadership Forum is a great group. There are a bunch of people that are just really excited about talking about carbon all day long. But they get together and they have little committees and they meet and they figure it out and they come up with this great stuff like baselines, which is amazing. So this is a wonderful example of a volunteer organization that's really helping us advance the ball on this topic. So definitely download this information and keep it, because this is how you can set your goal for what you're going to require of your contractor. This is what I'm going to require from you to meet, so that, you know, I want concrete, it's got to meet this number, right? All right, that's what you're going to do. If you don't spec it, you won't get it. For part one, you want to ask for your basic stuff, right? But critically, your building product disclosure requirements, your EPDs, and your material ingredients, documentation demonstrating the chemical inventory of a product, all right? And then part two, you want to put down your requirements for your EPD. So what you need to write under A, item 2, so under A, you want an EPD, right? That is at least 20% better or equal to the Carbon Leadership Forum, right? And then you're going to come down, then you have your embodied carbon baseline, that's my steel, and that's all the information I got from the Carbon Leadership Forum baselines, is the item 2A, 1A, plate steel, structural steel, hot rolled, hollow, blah. Then the system boundary is stage A1 through A3, which means extraction, transportation to the manufacturing site, and manufacturing. That's stage A1 through 3. Then your declared unit, and then your product category rules. You can find all the product category rules on EC3. You got to look. It's under the left-hand bar. That's what you need to say. If you put that into every section that has a coverage from EC3, you can start to get embodied carbon language into your specs and start to require this of your contractors. All right. We got through embodied carbon. We learned so much. Okay. Ecosystem health is the third of these systems. And ecosystem health is basically the natural air, water, biological cycles. It's all the other stuff in those EPDs. All right. That's what it is. So the thing we got to talk about the world and nature is, and I love this, this is the 2020 $20 billion health and climate disaster slide from the folks at NOAA. What's funny about this is they have one for every year, because I used to have one in a presentation. It was 2017, and I went and looked and I realized you can Google this and you can see all of them, like right on, they have all of them. So this is last year. So you can look next year on January 4th and they'll have the 2021. We look forward to that. But you can see the wildfires out in where you guys live, out where I live. I'm on the East Coast. I'm in New Jersey. We have the hurricanes, and that's sort of down on the Gulf Coast. And then in the middle of the country are the tornadoes and the severe weather. So that's kind of the story of the world. But NOAA also put out this information, which I love this diagram. This tells you exactly what's going to happen to where you live. As you can see, in my neck of the woods, it's a hurricane problem. In your neck of the woods, it is earthquakes, floods, and wildfires. That's it. Yes. So good. And earthquakes, floods, and wildfires for you guys. All right. I once did this presentation to an architecture firm with multiple offices, and one guy chimed in and said, "I'm good." I said, "What?" He said, "I'm good. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. I'm fine." And I thought, he is fine. So that's one thing we could all do as a possibility to prepare for climate change, is move to Ohio. Just, you know, if you're looking for suggestions. All right. Anyways. When I talk about this topic, ecosystem health is one of the really hard ones because it's so big. Like, how do I help the ecosystem? It seems kind of like maybe they don't need my help. But there's a couple of things we can do. FSC wood. I always stress we should be using nothing but FSC wood. I know it costs a little bit more money, but it's the right thing to do. It's well managed, and it's the right process to use. And the other thing we can consider is there's a lot of petroleum-based products in this world. Obviously we all know the plastics are petroleum based, and rubber and roof membranes, but nylon is petroleum based, and virtually all the carpets are nylon, and all fabric, unless it's 100% wool or 100% cotton, is made of petroleum based fiber. All right. So we can think this through a little bit and try to minimize all this stuff, because when we make a petroleum based product, you got to realize the first thing you got to do with a petroleum-based product is you got to put a fire retardant in it, because it's made of petroleum. It's going to catch on fire. So that's one of the issues. You know, that's one of the concerns that we have. If you don't spec it, you won't get it. This is my language for FSC wood. And again, under part 2, you see that is my wood embodied carbon language. So you need both FSC certified wood, and you need embodied carbon covered for wood. Petroleum-based products, I love this little statistic. I mean, we use virtually no natural materials anymore. We used to use a lot of natural materials. So one thing we could try to do is to minimize our petroleum-based products. There are a ton of plant-based carbon storing building materials on the market. They're might be kind of hard to find, but they're worth looking for. And that hemp comes up again. Hemp is an amazing carbon storing material, as well as being plant-based, so more natural, good for ecosystem health. So you can hit 2 of your issues by using some of this stuff. All right, the third thing, social health and equity. So social health and equity is about preferring products from manufacturers, you know, securing human rights, making sure their supply chains are good, positive impacts for workers, and all that kind of stuff. This one I find really, really hard, because it's hard to figure out a way to spec no slave labor. I mean, truly figuring that stuff out is finding products and trusting manufacturers, and going with I do a lot. I prioritize like construction specialties products all the time, because they have so many declaration labels, and I know it's a good company with solid products. So I don't really care if they have a declaration label on this. I just make sure that I try to always have them in my list, because again, good company, want to support the good companies. But I thought one way to talk about social health and equity is we can address the worker rights, and we can try to help think about their lifestyle and how they're doing. So I thought we could talk about Cancer Alley. So Cancer Alley is down south, off of Highway 10 on the bottom of the country near the Gulf of Mexico. And this is where all of the chloride industry in this country is. Chloride, we make more, US is the top exporter of chloride-based products in the world. We make a ton of it. And basically it's all based down there. Those are all little factories. It's all based down there because what they need is chloride is basically derived from salt. So salt, we remember from our high school chemistry class, which I wasn't a fan of personally, but okay, I survived. NaCl is salt. And so the Na is sodium and the Cl is chlorine, all right? So what you do is you separate the Na and the Cl, and you can make chlorine products. But the killer is these companies brag about it. This is from the ACC, which is the American Chemistry Council. This is a little publication they had where they said PVC molecules, only 40% of PVC molecules come from petroleum. 60% of it's chlorine. It's from salt. This, I couldn't believe, was a product that I had an architect ask me to use. It was a fake wood. I'm not going to tell you the name of it because there's no reason you need to know it. But this was a product that's better than wood. It's made of 60% rice husks, 22% common salt, and 18% mineral oil. It sounds great, doesn't it? It sounds like, oh my God, this is like a miracle product. I wonder where they make it. They make it in a factory that looks like this. Because what they're doing is they're based down by the Gulf of Mexico. And they are taking, this is what it looks like. In the top left, you see saturated brine. It goes into the tank, and those things are positively, negatively charged, and they slide a diaphragm down the middle. They separate it, and out comes sodium out this direction and chlorine out this direction. And that's how they make, that's the central piece of the chloride industry in this country. And the kicker for this is that diaphragm down the middle. The best diaphragm they've found by far to filter this is asbestos. So that is the primary use of asbestos in this country, is in the chloride industry. And where does that asbestos come from? It used to come from Brazil and Russia. Now it's 100% Russia. So we've got Russia sending us asbestos to help us make chloride, so we can kill as many people as possible on the Gulf Coast. All right, so this is one thing we can do if we're trying to improve our world, is get rid of PVC. PVC is in a ton of stuff. I know it's hard. We're all going to have to try hard. And chlorine is also a feedstock for epoxies and for polyurethanes. All right, so if you don't spec it, you won't get it. There are a lot of really good non-chlorine alternatives. I always recommend teams, if they don't tell me what roof they're going to use, I always say, let's use an SPS modified, because I don't want to use a single ply membrane. Because if I use a single ply membrane, the best performing single ply membrane is a PVC membrane, and I don't want to have the PVC fight again. So let's just avoid the fight by using something else. All right. Also, a fluid applied membrane is great. If you have a fluid applied membrane applied is an IRMA roof applied directly to concrete deck, you have a 50-year roof. The Smithsonian Institute roofs only with that system because they can't have a leak. Just can't happen. So those are two really good roofing products. You don't need to use PVC flooring. You can use linoleum flooring. There's some resinous floorings that aren't epoxies. There's Duracryl again. I love Duracryl. That's the liquid linoleum. And then there's carpeting. I know Interface is in that list. I know they're a PVC backer. They also now have some really great, really low carbon bio backers that are fabulous. Highly recommended.
And can I ask you a question that somebody's put in the chat here?
Yeah.
So when you talk about the PVC especially, and maybe you'll get to this, but what do you recommend for an alternative to PVC piping is one of the questions.
The only alternative to PVC piping is copper piping. And then if I once sat at a situation where Bill Walsh on one side and Braungart, Michael Braungart, who's the half of Cradle to Cradle with Liam McDonough, and Braungart was arguing how copper was bad, which copper isn't great either. Copper mining is evil, but that's the problem is, if all we had in our building was PVC piping, we'd be a lot better off. I mean, the PVC piping is tough to get rid of. It's super hard, but it is possible with copper. But what we should do, if nothing else, is minimize it. We don't need to put to me, PVC to some degree is like the red paintbrush. Just because you have a red paintbrush in your hand doesn't mean your entire room is red. Don't put PVC on everything. So when I talk about banning chlorine products, I'm talking, see my list. I don't have PVC piping on there. I have a lot of other stuff because we can ban luxury vinyl tile. We just can get rid of it. Now, I mean, if you're working, you can't maybe if you're working on affordable housing or commercial or university housing, but you can really try to do that. And you can get rid of vinyl wall coverings. There's a lot of good reasons to do that. You can get rid of PVC back carpet tiles. But yeah, the PVC piping is really hard. Copper is the only thing you can do. All right, so that's social equity. Circular economy is the last guy. The circular economy is all about reusing buildings and materials, designing for material efficiency, longer life, all that kind of stuff. So there's some really basic things that we can do for this. Obviously, primary thing is building reuse, which usually isn't an architect's choice. But if we can reuse buildings, that is much better from a carbon standpoint, and it's much better from a lot of different standpoints. The stuff we're putting in our buildings conceivably our buildings might become tomorrow's mines. I was at a presentation years ago, and Robin Gunther was saying, we're running out of some of the products. We're going to have to go back and reuse what we're using today. Maybe in 15, 20 years, we're going to have to reuse it because maybe we can't make it. I mean, right now, this I think is stopping. I'm seeing press from last week saying that the ridiculous cost of lumber is going down. I mean, lumber's has gone through a crazy cost increase because of COVID. And I'm seeing, just last week, the Wall Street Journal had it now, so they're starting to see it come down. But one thing you can do if you want to avoid paying a lot of money for lumber is you can go see if you can find some old lumber that someone tore out of a building. You can maybe find some stuff that's in a building that maybe it could be reused. But the other thing is, if we're going to reuse the stuff that we've put in our buildings, we want to be a little bit more focused on making sure it's good stuff. I try really hard not to use recycled rubber because it's all tire derived. And you don't want to use chewed up tires and put them in your K-6 elementary school. It's a bad idea because the stuff in tires is bad. So you got to be careful about the source you're using and what condition the source is in when you're reusing it. So that's one issue is if we're going to recycle our building materials, that's a good thing, but we got to be careful what goes in the first place. Designing for disassembly and adaptability. If you can take things apart, it's a lot easier to reuse them. There's been some really great work, especially on the carpet manufacturers, about how they take their fiber off their backing so that they can reuse the product. That's a great use. And the carpet manufacturers are really thought leaders in that, but also just making sure that the way the building goes together, it can be separated out, mechanically fastening things, not gluing things, that kind of thing. And product stewardship. This is the same kind of thing, designing with modularity. We're trying to reduce waste. we were all trained somehow in school that you're supposed to design on a 1 foot or 4 inch or 8 inch interval, just because that way you don't typically lay things out on a 2.5 inch interval. You try to lay things out in an even way so that you can know that you aren't going to be cutting the plywood more than you need to. You aren't going to be, you're going to be using all the pieces. I'm designing a shed right now for my house, and we're deciding how tall it's going to be based on which wood stud we're going to buy. It's either going to be 8 feet plate to plate or 104 5/8 inches plate to plate. So I don't know why, but that's a standard stud size. Didn't know that. Learned that yesterday. So, but trying to reduce waste is a really key thing. And another way of waste reduction is the product take back programs or leasing something. We produce a ton of waste. Construction debris is more than twice the amount of municipal solid waste. So that's ridiculous. That all this debris coming off construction sites is just piling up. And so we have to find a way of minimizing that. And I love a statistic from Architecture 2030. 1/3 of the existing buildings will be demolished by 2050, which is crazy. There's a perfectly good building. Why aren't we reusing it? I mean, some buildings you can't, but you could at least, if you strip down all the finishes and just keep with the structure, it's a perfectly good structure and you can work within it. I don't know. We should be trying as hard as we can to be reusing buildings as much as we can. And just in terms of waste management, the critical thing is to avoid the bottom of that pyramid. You want to avoid the landfill. The best thing that you can do is reduce. If you don't buy something, you don't have to maintain it, clean it, store it, and then eventually figure out how to get rid of it. If you just don't buy it and you don't need it. I mean, we don't need to be putting all this flooring on top of concrete floors. If we could try to find a way to work with concrete floors more. I mean, I try with teams I work with all the time. You do not need some sort of plastic floor product in back of house areas. Sealed concrete will be fine, and it'll be cheaper because it's easier to clean and you don't have to buy anything to put down. If you can't reduce, reuse, recycle, convert, and transform, but whatever you do, try really hard not to dispose of everything we're using. And spec solutions. The product take back programs are amazing. First one we'll talk about is the ceiling products. If you take ceilings off, out, down during the demolition process, stack them up, wrap that pallet with plastic wrap, Armstrong, Certainty, and USG will all come to your job site and take it away for free. And they will then churn that product up and make new ceiling products with it, which is great. All right. And you can go to their websites, you can see it. It's a really great thing. Also, the carpet manufacturers will do the same things. All of the carpet manufacturers will take your used carpet tile, wrapped, will take it away for free. Now, Shaw and Interface will take it back to their factory and make more carpet out of it. The other ones will just drive it to the landfill and dump it. Some of them are maybe using it for secondary uses. So you should look carefully at what everybody's doing. But truly, all these guys will take this stuff back. And this is a clip of Shaw's carpet reclamation spec, which is available on their website. But you can write that as a part of your demolition spec and require that they do that. I was at Living Product Expo 3 years ago, and the rep from Armstrong Ceilings and Interface Carpeting and Shaw Carpeting were all standing around going, we have these products, they're used 5% of the time. This is ridiculous. No one's using this. And they're like shaking their heads going, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to tell the world any louder than we already have that this is something we can do for you. Why don't we do this? And architectural salvage, I really think is a great idea. Like I said, the cost of wood right now is so high. One thing we can all do is look at salvage. There's a bunch of salvage yards across the country. I'm involved in a group that is doing a lot of different things, but this is one thing that they're doing is they're trying to track all the salvage yards. This is not released for public. It's not released publicly yet, but I took a little slide shot of it, and there are 4 places. I think one of them is Urban Ore. There's 4 places in the San Francisco area but you guys know where they are. There's a ton of places around that are architectural salvage organizations that you can go to. And what I used to do in my old firm is we used to take our sample library and we used to box it up And then we'd call the local guy. It was Second Nature in Baltimore. We called the local guys. They would come over in their truck and they would take our pieces of our sample library with them. And I always made a point of saying, this is the box full of metal, because if you can sell metal and make some money. But they would take the stuff away, like boxes full of old ceramic tiles. So if you're trying to figure out what to use with a sample library, that's one thing to consider, because some of these guys will take it off you and some of them will come and pick it up. So, because we used to have, you have like a window. It's like somebody got a window as a sample, as a submittal. And so we would send it to the salvage yards, and those guys love that stuff. There's also companies out there that are great. This is a great company. They're based in Ohio, Doors Unhinged. They sell reused commercial doors. I mean, they're cleaned up, they're perfectly good, they're warranted, and they are zero carbon, and they're cheaper. So these guys are out there, and Doors Unhinged is a great company. I met this guy. He came up to me at a conference and he said, Ann, we used to work together. And I was like, okay, sorry, I don't remember you. But Andrew Ellsworth is his name, and he runs this company. This is his little dream company. He's doing a great job. So look up Doors Unhinged. It's great. But it's reused doors, and they're perfectly good. Those are the 5 pieces of the materials pledge. So what is this materials pledge? Maybe you haven't heard of it. It's the A&D materials pledge. All these folks have signed it. So the deal is you sign the pledge, and it's pretty basic. The best way, and Charlie, I think is gonna throw these links on the chat. You go to the materials pledge page, and this gives you a little bit of information about it. And then on the right, it says sign the pledge. You click on that box, and it comes up, and you need to give your name, rank, and serial number, your email, and then you have to click yes, we sign the pledge. Your firm signs the pledge. And then if you have your logo, you can upload it there, and then the next time they publish the list of all the firms that have signed the pledge, you'll be listed on the logo, like the last page you just saw. So I would highly recommend you do this. And this, when we created this for the Materials Knowledge Working Group, it was modeled on the 2030. So if you remember, if you're old like me, if you remember, the AIA 2030, the 2030 challenge came out of Ed Mazaria's group, and it was posted as a challenge, and you were basically asked to promise that you would try to be net zero carbon operations. You would design to net zero carbon operations by 2030. So all you had to do was just say, I promise I'll try. So that's what you did. So then the AIA 2030 commitment followed that. And that was the AIA coming up with documents that would allow us to track what we did. And then if that document became the DDX, and then it was a way of submitting, and then the commitment, you sign the commitment, and then you're required to do a bunch of stuff, including submit how you had done and fill out the Excel sheet. So the pledge is kind of the same concept. The first thing we do is we pledge that we'll do a better job, first thing. And you sign the pledge, and that's all you're signing. You're signing to say, I pledge that I'm going to try to do this, right? Then we had the idea, because we didn't want to use challenge commitment, so we came up with pledge and framework. So that was, we were going to come up with this framework that would back up the pledge. So that's what's happening now. So the other thing, and this I'm so excited about, because when I was preparing for this talk, I was starting to do, I knew that the AIA was developing a starter guide. So I had the working copy of it, and I was starting to do screen clips and put them on and make a slide. And then I went and realized, oh my God, this thing is here. I think this launched last week. So the Materials Pledge Starter Guide is on the website, and all those little, how can I get started? All those little buttons in the middle, you can click on, and each of them will give you 3 suggestions for what, where to start. What can I do? So you can click through and see all the suggestions, and then there's resources at the bottom. But the notion is, this is how you get started on doing this stuff, and you can sort of swim your way through it and figure out the best ways to go and do this. All right, and it's truly, this is all about, it's all about trying. It's, the pledge is like, okay, I'm gonna try. That's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to get as many people as possible to sort of give this a go, kind of a thing. It would be a good thing to have a tracking sheet. This is my tracking sheet, but this tracking sheet's floating around the world. A lot of you have probably seen something similar. Some of you might be like, wait, I have a tracking sheet. How come it looks so much like the same? But a lot of us are sharing this information. It's getting out. People are using it, blah, blah, blah. But the point is, the rows are products and the columns are attributes. So we try to give this to our contractors so that they can fill this out. If they don't want to, if they have their own system, that's great. But this is a good example so they see, and this is how you can total up, how many declare labels do I have? how many HPDs do I have? And then you can, it's the same way they used to do recycled content, titled up at the end, and then on the right-hand side is low emitting stuff, so they can total that up too. But the notion is you have to track this stuff, so you have to keep track of where you are, how you're doing, so you know that things are going well. So that's kind of the notion, all right? And we also have to work together. This is not a me or you thing. This is, we all have to find a way to come together on this, help each other out, share our resources, and try to basically make the world a better place. That's the notion. And we just have to, and we really have to ask our manufacturers to do better. And they are, they're responding. And to some degree, this pledge was, a response. There's been this back and forth with architects and manufacturers. The architects back in 2012 wrote letters saying, we want transparency information. And then the manufacturers responded like 2 years later, wait, we gave you all this information. What are you doing? And so this pledge was, to some degree, was a response to this letter. Okay, this is what we're trying to do. So we're all trying, the architects and manufacturers are all trying to work together to figure this out. But we need to do a better job so we can come up with a better environment and have a better place to live. And that is it. So, questions?
That was great, Ann. Thank you so much. I'm sure we have some questions heading into this. So I will turn this over to Charlie, who will read out the questions, and then whoever wants to speak live, raise your hand.
Or throw something in the chat, either way. But Ann, this is great. This is a lot of information. I'm hoping that our audience isn't, I mean, if they've been into this process, the information you're giving is really helpful. If they're just kind of starting out, then it could be kind of overwhelming. So I think, to your point, Ann, this is about pledging. This is about taking those first steps. And I really like the project reporting spreadsheet that you had at the end, which you said was for contractors, but I think it would be really helpful to be able to use that as an architect or a designer who's going through, these products and trying to understand, what are the categories I'm working with, and then what are these benchmarks I'm working with. Is there something similar to that designers can use? Is this something that, like, the AIA framework for design excellence is a good place to go, a starting point? What are some good starting point places?
The starting points for figuring out where to go. I could put up. I can run through the places to look for stuff. Should I do that?
Yeah, I think just going back over that is really helpful. I don't think we need to have an exhaustive list, but it could be like a spreadsheet.
No, but okay, but I can, and I could, hold on, let me just pull this up, because I have this, we talked about this yesterday. I have this, I just want to pull something else up. All right, where are we here? Let me share this. All right, so you need a tracking tool. All right, so this is sort of the rundown of, this is a little thing that USGBC put out, which is great. Is this a product? To figure out if it's a product, right? Is it part of an assembly, or is it a finished product? And it kind of goes through all these little things. So, and this was to help people figure out what was a product, so they could list products when they were trying to get lead points, and how many products do I have that have declarations, right? But I love that little slide. Oh wait, I have to do slideshow. Hold on. Here, there, that. All right, that's the product list. This is a great little I'll have this. I'll give you this PDF. I can give you this presentation as a PDF too. This is quick. All right, if you want, Charlie, you have none of these links, but you'll just have to wait. This is the HPD repository. This is where you go looking for HPDs, and it's pretty basic. This slide I shot, which has Armstrong. You can literally type in a manufacturer's name, or you can look on the right-hand side. You can search by CSI section. You can search by manufacturer name. You can search for product name. It's great. All the HPDs in the history of mankind are sitting here. An HPD is a health product declaration. This is what's going to tell you what your impacts are in terms of what the ingredients of the material are. All right, so that's the HPD repository. Cradle to cradle is another great place to look. Cradle to cradle is pretty expensive, so there aren't as many of them. There are two kinds of cradle to cradle. Left-hand side is cradle to cradle certified products, which is certifying things on 5 scales: health, social equity, environmental impact, and 2 I'm not bringing up in my head right now. But anyways, there's 2 more. But it's this holistic thing. It's a really great system. And then one on the right is the health material health certificate registry, which just focuses on the health piece. All right, which is the ingredient list. All right. Declare.livingfuture.org. This is the declare labels, and this is great. You can search. What I usually do is go here, and then it doesn't show up on my slide, but on the very bottom, I'll cross that black line on the bottom. You can click on manufacturer, and then it'll list all the different manufacturers. So you can just go and then click, or there's a magnifying glass. You can search, and you can search for insulation or mineral oil or paint or whatever. So pretty basic. This is Sustainable Minds. Sustainable Minds is pretty good. It agglomerates. That's not a word. It collects products, and it puts them in and it sorts them. So you can see they have environmental performance and they have material ingredients. So it'll tell you if they have HPDs. It'll tell you if they have declare labels. It'll tell you if they have EPDs. This is one of the better total sites, I think, for if you want to just go to one place and look up everything. This is actually a good site. Home Free. Not a lot of people know about this one. Home Free is HBN, which is Healthy Building Network. This is their site, which is focused on affordable housing. But whatever, who cares what their focus is? Everybody uses drywall, everyone uses paint, and everyone uses flooring. So they have these different categories. And if you click on the little picture, it'll tell you their pieces of how they rate these things and what they're focused on. This is really worth time. This is great. And I did some work for them and I wrote specs. So if you click on the paint or the flooring, you will get to download the paint specs, and you will get my specs for paint and the flooring. They are there. So just as a little hint, that's a place to look. But Home Free is a great site, and they have tons of information, but you will spend weeks learning all about why, this is better than that. Environmental product declarations, a lot of them are on UL Spot, but truly the best place to look is EC3. But this is another place to look. And a year ago, this was the only place you could look. And this is another place to look for EPDs, but again, EC3 is going to be your best bet. Giga Origin. Giga Origin is where Mindful Materials is located. And you can go and look at Mindful Materials. I believe the click link for that is onto the right. I can't see it, but it might be behind my head because I'm looking at the pictures here. But this is another, and this one's really hard to find. You need the link. It's origin.build, because if you try to Google Giga, you just end up learning about Greek letters. But this has tons of products in the library, and it's got all this information about all the different sustainable attributes. And then, that's it. Red list, that's it. Oh, this is the wheel, all right, that.
And the red list, could you talk a little about the red list?
The red list
that's
is
Living Building Challenge, right?
That's ILFI's Living Building Challenge, and it's 23 chemicals of concern. And then the idea is they want you to have absolutely none of that stuff in your building materials. It's actually a pretty good way of starting, because it's really hard to do, but it gives you a list to work from. So, okay, I have to be red list free. Okay, are any of these bad chemicals in this product? And then the answer, you can figure out the answer. So you have a work to list to. It's a list to work to. It's an exclusionary list, and it makes it easier. If you're trying to, what we started with transparency, we started with just wanting people to give us transparency documentation. We wanted you to tell us what the environmental impact of your product was. So we wanted an EPD. We wanted you to tell us if there were any hazards in the product. So we wanted an HPD or a declare label. We wanted to tell us what was in the product, what was it made of. And when we first started this back in 2012, 2013, it was all about yes or no. I have a label. Okay, well then we'll use your product because now we have a label. But we have so many products that are labeled now. We're now starting to get to part 2, which is the clear part 2, which is, okay, which one of these is better? And how can we eliminate some of the bad stuff? And so, but if you look at an HPD, you have to read the HPD and go, okay, what is this? What is this? And you end up having to be a chemist, and it gets really complicated. When I was working with Home Free to go through their paint and write a paint spec, they were explaining to me, they were worried about APE, which is a long chemical name. I can't remember what it stands for, but they were worried about it. And so I was looking and I was saying, I found these HPDs that didn't have any APE in it. And the guys were saying, no, that's a surfactant. So they might have had a different product that's a surfactant. But if I look at it, because I'm a chemist, I can figure out that has APE in it. And I'm looking at him like, okay, I'm not a chemist. What do I do? So what you need to do is find ways to do the best you can, but also you need to find ways to understand what these things are, and to lean on sources that are good, that can help you to prioritize products, and to try to work on just doing better products. That's the kind of idea. But so Red List is a great thing. It's really very, very hard to do, but it is a great system, because now that it's been out for so long, there are a lot of Red List free products. I do have some clients that are trying to do, like some of my school clients that are trying to do like elementary schools, no Red List products inside, which is great, because you got little kids sitting on the floor. You don't want any, even just make your flooring not any Red List free. That's not impossible. That's pretty easy. You just got to make sure you focus on it a little bit, because the kids are we all remember, or maybe we had kids recently and we watched them sit in kindergarten. They're all sitting on the floor and they're doing this, what kids do. So I'm going to touch something, and then I'm going to lick my hand, and then I'm going to let you lick my hand, and then I'm going to lick my hand again. So that's what we're going to do. This is my kindergarten. So maybe that's just my kids. Your kids do that? My kids? I don't know.
All kids.
All kids. So Red List is actually something that it's a good place to start. But I need to warn you, it's really hard, but it's not impossible. And it's a way of prioritizing. Once you've realized that these carpet manufacturers have Red List, you'd be like, oh, you're my new favorite.
Right.
This paint, okay, you're my new favorite. And let's be honest, I took a piece of Parmesan cheese to the depot once and had to match it to the paint color. That's how I got the paint for my kitchen paint. They can match any color. Any paint manufacturer can produce any color. So you can use whatever wand you want. Pratt & Lambert, when I had my job, when I was working with Michael Graves, everything was Pratt & Lambert. They had to use Pratt & Lambert paint because it had the best color wand. Okay, I believe you. So take the Pratt & Lambert color wand and take it to the Benjamin Moore store and say, I want this. And they'll say, right up, and they'll just match it. So there you have it. They can match anything.
Good.
All right.
That's
that was
great.
a long digression.
Okay, so more information. Everyone should just remember that this is a process and none of it's perfect. And I think that Ann has done a great job when you get the slides, which you will all get when we're done here, or at least shortly thereafter, has helped kind of cull some of this information into some of the more serious contenders out there who are producing materials that are trying to address this in an honest way, not in a greenwashing way. So that's the most important thing. Can I return to a question that came earlier when you were talking about social equity, social justice side of materials? And one of the folks here, Vivian, asked the question about, are there ways to know how to avoid forced labor in the production of materials or for-profit prison labor as well? Maybe that's domestically, I'm not sure. And a place where you can go to find that information. And then she ended up posting up a link to designingforfreedom.org, which is in the chat. But are there any other links or ideas you know of, Ann, to filter through things like that, or prison or slavery? Oh my gosh, in 2020, 21 are being used in products?
I thought, if you go to the, I just went to the pledge page, the starter page. And if you click, this is that pledge starter guide. And if you click on equity, which you put the link in the chat, I know. They do have a couple of places, Design for Freedom Report and Social Hotspot Database. There are some decent things in here. And here, International Labor Organization Core Convention. So this is sort of addressing forced labor. This is not, actually, I have such a hard time with social equity because I don't really have great answers about it, but I did see when I was looking at this has some great links. that maybe that might be a place to look for that. I do believe there are also, I thought there was a lead pilot credit on this topic, and that might provide some more resources. I know some of the people, Joel Todd Osborne, is that her name? Yes. She was working with the Materials Knowledge Working Group, and she was on the pilot credit tag for USGBC, and I know this was an area of focus for her, and I thought they had put a pilot credit together for that, so you could look for that as well. But this looked great. I was really impressed when I saw this equity piece.
Very good. So that's a good place for research. It's not just, you don't just go there to sign up and say, I'm going to try. It actually has resources as well. Which is
yeah, the starter guide, I mean, and it has all these different bits. So ecosystem health, so require EPDs from manufacturers, and here, read more about them. And that's a link to something that the AI has done before, right? But and the human health piece, it has, and this is great too. Look, this is where you find the product. This is the link to the declaration, the HPD declaration page. This is the link to the declare label. That's cradle to cradle, right? This is textiles. BIFMA level is behind a paywall, so you can go to it, but you have to pay to get it. But yeah, there's a bunch of and there's a bunch of other resources. The AIA Healthy Materials Protocol. This was something that was done by Arup and somebody else. I forget who else. But Francis Yang and Arup did a lot of writing on that, and that's a great 30-page document that has just more information if you want more things to look at. But this is great support here of all these different things. So, I mean, it's really great resources the AIA has put together. In my work with all the AIA committees I've been on, they've got this great backup staff that comes in and swoops in and just does all this great work. And the sustainability piece of AIA sits in the knowledge community area which is where they kind of all, and it's also where they create their education. So they have these people that are really, really good at developing education do this work. So it's really impressive. I've always been impressed by the AIA.
This is great. And we're going to have to bring you back and have you speak to our California AIA group. They've got a great series as well. I'll give a little plug for that. But if you go on the AIA California website, they have a whole series of, I guess you'd call them sustainability focused presentations. And they haven't done a lot on materials, certainly not as deeply as you have. So this is really great knowledge. And I'm happy to, I think we get a big audience too if you get all of California. So it's just really important for everybody to be doing this.
One thing to keep in mind as a possibility is that the one thing we did at the Materials Knowledge Working Group was we created the Materials Matter series. So what we did was we put an RFP out. You may have seen the AIA 2030 series, which was some of the best education I ever saw. And that was done, both the Materials Matter and the AIA 2030 were done by the UWash Seattle. We hired educators to put together the storyboards and the focus, and then you bring in speakers and they cover the topic. So I just attended the AIA Minnesota Materials Matter section. That was last month, and it's really great. I mean, it's a really great session, and it allows you to really dig deep into this stuff. So it's another thing you can consider doing. And later next week, I'm doing an AIA Potomac Valley, which is one of the Maryland chapters. They're doing a thing where they're showing the first in the Materials Matter AIA courses that they're apparently releasing for free. So they're showing that, and then we're going to talk about it. So that's another option. There's a bunch of really great material out there that the AIA has developed for this. So, all good.
Can I put in my plug before the question, just since we're talking about programming?
But you know what?
Slide, Ann?
I did, and I never got to it. Why didn't I ever get to that? Hold on. Let's get to.
So this is
wait. No, I gotta get to the end. Hold on.
Okay, this is just a plug for a program that AIA San Francisco it's a series on healthy materials. I think it's one back. There you go. And I think we're on our third, this is part 2, but it's a third presentation out of 6 in total on healthy materials. This one's going to focus on enclosures. And they've been really great. They're not giving you nuts and bolts like Ann is on where to go and how to dive deep on EPDs. Although they do talk about that, it's more about the equity side. It's the big picture that Ann is also talking about, that on why and how you can choose all these different materials differently when you have knowledge on why you're making a change from the standard materials. So this is on Monday. It's here and it's on the West Coast, so it's 5 p.m. Pacific time. And the link there is either you can get that guy right there, or go on the AIASF website to their calendar, and it's there as well. So, and come to there are a bunch of other ones later in July and in August of this month too. So thanks, Ann.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Charlie. So Ann, I had a question. So, all right, we list out the materials we're using on a particular project. Then we do the research with all those great resources, or a couple of the resources that you provided, and then we put together our specs, and now we present it to the contractor. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was, how we get, we've written the spec, and now how do we get it implemented? What do we need to do with, how do we convince the contractor to follow this and also get client buy-in? What are your successes in implementing?
I think the key thing is communication. And I think I think I've been to a couple of pre-construction meetings where you sort of get the contractor there and you sort of talk through the issues, and I think it's critical to explain to them what's important to you, and and try to get them focusing on hitting some of the things that are important to you. I mean, I have one client right now, it's a very large job, and they actually have an embodied carbon goal, and it's unusual, it's unheard of. But that's what's coming. Not a lot of people are talking seriously about embodied carbon. I have all this great embodied carbon language I read in my specs now. And one of the things I do is I talk to teams, and people that I really respect, that are friends, that are really, really good at sustainability, that tell me, take the embodied carbon language out. None of the concrete guys in this jurisdiction are going to have an EPD. We know that. Stop it. And it's like, okay, we'll take it out. But let's figure out, no, we can get this. You can put the embodied carbon language in for carpet tile, because that's not a local thing. It's everywhere. You can't maybe put it for concrete or steel. You should be looking and making sure that people around you. I was doing work in Boston for a client, and I found out all their steel comes from New York State. It's like, are you kidding? So, I mean, the only way they get steel with an EPD would have to come from New York State. Sorry. So you have to figure out what's critical. But then once you figured out what's critical, you got to communicate that to the contractor. And I think it's also important to not ask for stuff they can't achieve. Don't ask them for embodied carbon. Don't ask them for EPDs on concrete if they just don't exist. That's just not fair. And everyone's going to look at you and go, oh, this is so stupid. So if you can make sure that you you can achieve things, ask them to achieve them, and then work together to get it done, I think it's always going to work better. So, and I think it's also important to prioritize what you want. So if your critical thing is this one piece, tell them that, and make sure that they understand that, because they want a happy client too. So they want to make sure that everything's working well, and they want to make sure that they're doing what you want done. So I think that's the important thing. It's all about communication. Yeah,
I agree. We were talking the other day about just even having that kind of brief meeting with, let's say, your tile sub, and explaining, this is what I want to look like. The tile sub understands, and then it's done right the first time, and we're not, ripping things out when they go wrong, or, and then wasting people's time, money, and so that's great.
And I think also, if you start talking to them about, this is what I want, and they might say to you, well, I know that you found this great product that has this health product declaration, but that product has terrible support, and I've tried to use it 3 times and it hasn't worked. Well, then you learn a valuable lesson, because I didn't know that. The rep that I talked to seems great, but you're telling me that the guys that install it suck. Okay, that's good to know. So to me, because it's really, what we do is really complicated. We use so many different things. So we can't be an expert at everything. So we need to try really hard to talk to as many different people as possible, so we can learn from them, and hopefully they can learn something from us. So, and I just think that open communication is always the best thing. So, and I'm always fascinated. And you learn little tidbits, and you're like, okay, that was interesting. I had no idea. There's one project I'm working on. It's a big project that has a contractor it's huge. The contractor is really involved in all the phases. And it's amazing what we're learning from the contractor. I mean, they were the one. I had heard the price of wood was going up about a year ago. And so I reached out to them and said, have you heard this? And they sent me a note and they explained the problem they were having was COVID supply. This was June of 2020. This was right in the heart of COVID. June, they said, COVID-19 is upsetting supply chains. No one knows what's going on with the wildfires either, and they don't know what that's going to do to the supply. And it was fascinating to see, because this is a guy that his job is to buy wood. You know, that's not what you and I do. We might buy some wood occasionally, but you know, that's what he focuses on. And it's like, to hear that expertise from somebody is so amazing, and it's such a great moment to learn something. And I heard that, and I immediately emailed 3 or 4 of my clients and said, guys, if you have cost overruns in the project, make sure that you make it clear to the owner there's craziness going on in the wood industry. And you shouldn't, you know, because if architects are over budget, they might have to redesign for free. And I was trying to make the point, don't redesign for free during COVID, because it might be because of crazy supply chain issues. So just, you know, but you need to know all that. So I just try to, when I learn something from this group, I try to tell this group too, you know, keeping confidentiality, but just sort of the general information, just because we all have to learn from each other. So that's, I think, critical.
Okay, that's great. Let's see, I'm going to share the poll result for the first 2 questions, and then I'm going to post another one, but we can keep talking. So let's see, I'm going to share results. So does everyone see that on their screen? So we had, I think, 12 people respond. Most people provide a spec, so at 83%. And then whether you do it, your spec, you have it in-house or a consultant, 42% do in-house and 58% have a consultant.
Can we
That's
ask,
great.
now I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you don't
Yeah.
have a spec, is it just mean you don't have a spec book? That must mean the specs are in the drawings. Someone can answer.
Yeah, I could have written a question, added a question, or, you know,
No, I'm just
yes,
curious.
no, or I don't know. Does someone want to jump in?
Well, I think maybe I think, Ann, where this is coming from is the smaller the project, the less, you know, data you're providing. You're not giving any small contractor a 1,000-page spec for a, you know, a deck or even a small house.
Yeah.
If that information is on the drawings, or at least there's some level of it. So I just, maybe you can give us your thoughts on how do you specify differently, if at all, for a short form or a small project spec, and architects who are, you know, don't have staff to work on this or can't hire a spec writer. Mm-hmm. What do you do differently for them versus somebody who's, you know, does have a 1,000-page spec?
Well, people that don't hire spec writers, I typically don't work with, because, you know, they're, but no, you know, I write, what I do typically, this is interesting. So what I do for a lot of firms, big firms, for my schematic design is I do a thing, I called it my expanded table of contents. So you have basically, imagine a table of contents, and then under some of them, most of them, you have little bullet points. So under architectural woodwork, you have all the wood's going to be maple. It's all going to be rift sawn, you know, all the plastic laminate's going to be this, blah, 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 blah. So what it's doing is it's giving them at schematic design, something organized under CSI master format, information so the contractor can look at it and price, oh, this is the kind of carpet they want to use. Okay, these are the kind of insulation they're going to have, that kind of thing. But you could do the same exact thing. If you're on a smaller job, you could just say, all right, this is what we're going to do. I mean, I can see, I mean, people are posting comments saying that they, you know, they put it on the drawings, which is fine. And you could do a little book thing that could just talk really, really very briefly about just what you're trying to do and what's important to you. Again, focus on what's important to you, don't focus on the other stuff. And I would want to stress, like I said at the beginning, this is about material selection. It's not so much about spec rating. I mean, it is about spec rating, is what I do, but it's material selection. So even if you're just putting details in the drawings, you can still choose better material. You can still try to avoid phthalates. You can try to do low carbon options. You don't need a spec, just choose a better material. Because truly what a spec writer does is help you select materials and document the selection of the materials. But everybody does that. I mean, the architect chooses some materials, the interior designers choose some materials, the spec writer chooses some materials, and let's face it, the contractor chooses some materials. There's plenty of materials. Not many of us say exactly which fire stopping product, joint sealant, or metal stud we want. You know, that sheetrock, whatever. I mean, I do, but you know, but I'm doing more of that kind of selection because I'm trying to tie down to manufacturers I know have better declaration information. But truly what we're trying to do is choose better products. So, and again, focus on the products you care about. If you're doing someone's house, focus on every single thing that's going inside and make sure that all the things that are going to be inside the building so that they won't off gas and they'll meet requirements and they'll be healthier products. Put those inside. And that can happen even if you don't have a spec. It can happen with a drawing note. I'm pointing at this, it's this, you know. Yeah, so anyways.
Any comments on SpecLink? I see somebody here saying we now use SpecLink software in-house.
Yeah, I use MasterSpec, I don't use SpecLink, but they're both good. And the thing is that they provide you with huge quantities of information. So that I take my MasterSpec documents and then I have my own base documents that I use. So I continually am putting new information in that I learn. A great example is 3 months ago, the Canada regulated all foam insulation has to meet a certain much lower global warming potential. So then what that did is that kicked into gear. DuPont, Owens Corning, and Kingspan all have a low GWP XPS insulation product. So into my base spec for insulation goes, this is the GWP requirement for insulation, and here are the 3 options listed. You know, Owens Corning, NGX, was it Foamular NGX, I think, and all these guys, all 3 of them. So boom, that's it. You've got 3 choices. We're done. And it doesn't. I don't really care, honestly, if it's the rule, the regulation in this country. It's what goes into the spec because that's the best product on the market. So, and I talk to the teams, and if they, you know, we see it, if it's a project that has no budget, that might not go in because it is more expensive. But you know, we try to get it in as much as we can. So, but the point is that if you, what I do is I create my base documents and I use them as what I start from. So, but MasterSpec provides and BSD SpecLink provides great documents that work really well. So yeah, it makes spec writing a lot easier. You don't have to just write 1,000-page documents off the top of your head. That would be hard.
That's great. I'm gonna, does anyone have any other questions? Because I'm gonna launch the last poll, or we can keep the conversation going. So I'm gonna launch it now. I'll let everyone vote. Oh, I forgot to vote.
Well, I hope the not likely people are already doing all this. That's what I'm hoping.
They wouldn't be on this webinar.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, I hope everyone is going to start choosing something that they maybe really care about, you know, and it could be something you're interested in, you know. Maybe you've always hated resinous floors and you want to choose a better one. Duracryl, Duracryl. I'm not supposed to use the manufacturer's name because I apologize, Libby. We'll keep that a secret. And you know, but there's a bunch of great stuff out there. I mean, there's a bunch of great manufacturers. So, and even, I mean, even if you just meet somebody and they're really friendly and they're nice and they're helpful, and maybe they, you know, maybe you're at a conference and they like explain to you where the best place to get a taco was. There's a good reason to spec their product. What the heck, you know? So, I mean, assuming they are a PVC manufacturer, but you know. So,
yeah.
But you need to find a way to prioritize.
Speaking of PVC, I wondered, I had seen this movie a couple back in 2002, Blue Vinyl. Have you seen that? Yeah. So just that's about the vinyl siding industry, which I think is based in that Cancer Alley in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So if people want to learn more about that, I'm just going to type it in to the chat here, Blue Vinyl, if they want to watch something related to that.
That's a good show.
Yeah. Okay, well, this has been great. This, green specs have been kind of a passion of mine. And I think it's that, like you said, you can specify, it's really where the rubber hits the road, and it's where you make things matter. So this is really important and a topic. And I want to thank you for being here, Ann.
Absolutely. Well, I couldn't, when you told me you were from Big Sur,